right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for the Equity at Work webinar series, Woke at Work. So first, I just want to again say welcome and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us this evening. We would like to just invite you to know a little bit about the mission of Associated Black Charities, which is to eliminate structural barriers and advance long-term solutions that create new opportunities for African Americans to thrive. We acknowledge structural racism's effect on the racial wealth gap, workplace discrimination, health inequity, disparities in housing policies and practices, educational inequality, discriminating and dehumanizing laws and policies, and more. We use an equity framework as a convener and thought leader to end race-based barriers that impede African Americans from having an opportunity to succeed. This is at the heart of all of ABC's programmatic initiatives. And this particular webinar series, the Equity at Work series, explores the lived experiences of navigating the workplace while Black by addressing common issues and obstacles affecting the Black worker and Black professional. ABC aims to create awareness and provide tools and resources to navigate barriers successfully. So if you're joining this webinar tonight, you probably heard the term stay woke, and you want to know what we're talking about and all the intricacies and details of what it means to be a Black worker and a Black professional and to maintain your wokeness. I'm going to actually ask that tonight we unpack the nuances of what being woke in the workplace means and how it impacts everyone who is on this panel. And so to get us started, we have an amazing panel with us, some dynamic speakers, organizers, thinkers, leaders, and community. We are very privileged to have them in this space with us. And so I'm going to ask if our panelists could please introduce themselves and share why this discussion around being woke at work as a Black professional is so important today. We can start with Professor Unique.
Good evening, everyone. Very grateful to be here. Thank you, Associated Black Charities and Charnell. My name is Professor Unique Robinson. All pronouns, it's really all good. Baltimore City native, Park Heights specifically, but poet, performer, professor at Mellon Institute College of Art, and now director of the MFA Community Arts Program at MICA. So very grateful to be here. Being woke at work for me just looks like showing up as my authentic self and knowing that I deserve to be here, right, in this space. And I think as Black folks, we have not been made to feel like we are deserving of our greatness and working towards our greatness in ways that our ancestors are proud of us for, in ways that they were historically barred from, right? So it's just showing up, quite frankly, is me being there, right? There means that, there's a level of consciousness to know what I'm worth. And also, aside from that, just how I choose to teach, what I choose to do, and how I choose to exist in the workplace, in shifting notions of systematic injustice and racism and classism and homophobia and so on and so forth that one would otherwise experience. And just, again, showing up as my fullest self. I'll say a lot more very soon, but I wanted to start there.
Thank you, Professor Unique. Now we hear from Andrea Williams Muhammad.
Yeah, that's a loaded question to start off with. But I'm like Professor Unique. I show up authentically in who I am. For those who know me and have worked with me, know that how I am personally is how I show up at work. How I show up at work is how I show up personally. I keep myself centered and grounded in the fact that I'm comfortable with who I am. And I'm comfortable being a Black woman, and I'm comfortable being a Black Muslim woman. So that in the workplace right now is a dynamic sometimes that is applauded and sometimes that has been vilified, but I still do it. I do it with joy and grace. And I accept the responsibility with a humbleness to honor my ancestors.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you. We're hearing the raising of ancestors. Definitely welcome in this space. This is a space for all of our people, right? Whether they are here in the present or in the spiritual realm. So we appreciate that lifting up from both Professor Unique and Andrea. Thank you. Elliott Kelly Jr., could you share with us?
What's going on? How you feeling?
All right, feeling good.
That's a blessing. So my name is Elliott Kelly Jr., pronouns he, him, his. From Louisville, Kentucky. I work at a nonprofit called Fund for the Arts. Full time. I do a lot of other things from 5 to 9. So a lot of other things in the community. Being woke at work to me, going really I hate piggybacking, but really, Professor Unique, what you said, specifically the phrase being the fullest version, not even just the most authentic version, but the fullest version of yourself. I think that's one of the biggest things. And then just accepting every aspect of my identity. And that doesn't mean just the labels, right? My blackness, my maleness, my sexuality, my gender identity, not just the labels of my identity, but not just the black and white, but the gray areas, the nuances, the in-betweens that make up, just everything that's woven into the fabric of who I am. Just embodying all of those things in every moment. And even in the moments you experience imposter syndrome, you don't feel worthy to be in a space, acknowledge them, be aware of them, and remind yourself, right? So for me, being woke, to be woke at work is to be aware in all
Yeah.
spaces. And I think it's kind of what it embodies to me, just being aware of everything, internally being aware of everything that goes on with you emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and then being able to manifest that in a physical way in your workspace or in whatever space you occupy in the moment.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. And I should introduce myself. My name is Charnell Covert. My pronouns are she, her, and goddess. I am here representing the wonderful Associated Black Charities, a program manager and strategist, and excited to do this work with this amazing panel and have this conversation. I'm going to put on, as well as Professor Unique, I'm also an educator and professor. So I wear many hats, both literally and figuratively, but I'm going to put on my professor hat for a moment and give us some context about this conversation and some interesting facts. So according to The Hill, 1/3 of all registered voters in the US identify as being woke or having, quote, woke politics. Since the uprisings of 2020 in regards to the George Floyd murder, and particularly Breonna Taylor, companies have committed to a greater level of either what they call corporate responsibility, social responsibility, corporate wokeness, corporate social justice in some spaces, or diversity, equity, and inclusion in response to the unrest that we've seen around the country. So we were all bearing witness. And I recently learned a new word from a scholar, Dr. Trevia Lindy. I believe that we should cite Black women and Black people, the work that we do in scholarship. So shout out to Dr. Trevia Lindy for this term, witnessing. Witnessing is deeper than just witnessing and viewing, but being a part of the very thing that you're experiencing, like those folks who have recorded some of the police brutality that we've seen in our communities for posterity's sake, and so that justice could be had. That is a form of witnessing. So witnessing these murders and seeing that, we've seen great response from corporations to try to address some of the systemic harm that has been caused. We know that there has been massive policy reform targeting assumed wokeness from Republican elected officials, many from those in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis, and the Anti-Woke Act. His work and other conservatives have pushed for a, quote, war on wokeness. And we'll get into that in this conversation. And there has been an inextricable link to the term stay woke and an inextricable link, to the term stay woke and the Black Lives Matter movement, beginning with protests, civil disobedience, and unrest with the Michael Brown murder in 2014. So we really can't separate some of the social justice movements we've seen with this term. So you might be asking yourself, Charnell, where did this term woke originate from? So in 1938, a blues singer, Huddie Ledbetter, warned Black people that, quote, they best stay woke, keep their eyes open. This was after a trial that happened in Scottsboro, Alabama, with some young Black men being wrongfully accused of a murder, and there was massive racial killings in that area. And so in 1938, that's where this term first got popularized in pop culture. After that, a Black writer, William Melvin Kelly, who was a Black novelist, published an article in the New York Times in 1962. He was talking about Black vernacular and Black English and Black slang, and he defined being woke as someone who was well-informed and up-to-date. Black folks have used the term of woke to refer to someone who is deeply invested, concerned, and challenged by the existing systems of oppression and inequity and wants to change them, as well as being aware. We've even seen the term being used in mainstream culture with other markers of identity to refer to anyone who is aware of racial and social justice issues, whether they relate to racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, transphobia, queerphobia, and the like. And singers such as Childish Gambino with the famous song Redbone, I called it Stay Woke, I didn't even know the actual title, but with that song that put into the fore the chorus of Stay Woke, challenges audience to be aware and actively engage in fighting against trauma, harm, and injustice that impact Black, Indigenous people of color in this country and globally. So just wanted to give some context about where this word came from. Language is super important. And now I'm going to get into the conversation. Now that we have some general understandings of how it is defined, how being woke is defined, where it came from, I want to ask our panelists, how would you define being woke? And do Black professionals need to stay woke? So we're actually going to start with Andrea on this question, if you will. Lead us off. You're fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Stay woke at work. I think for me, I'm in a space that I operate. I actually am a program coordinator for a program that is designed to address inequities and disparities in maternal health outcomes. So for me personally, that means that I have to show up in every meeting, as I said, as that person who holds space. And I hate to use that term sometimes, holding space, but I prefer to say I take up space because I work in a predominantly white organization. So I literally take up space. I literally take up conversation purposefully, because oftentimes our voices, fall to the back, or are undermined or belittled, or only given a short amount of time in which to address and react to certain things that are going on around us. So for me as a professional, it takes on a personal kind of thing. I got all the degrees in the world, but I don't code switch. I use my everyday vernacular. I dress how I feel in any given moment. And I say I say what is on my heart and what I know is correct. And I say it unapologetically. Charnell, she's smiling because she knows me. And she knows how I operate in those spaces. And I really don't care. And I think the older I get, that really don't care takes on a whole nother, I really don't care. So that's me. That's how I show up and how I think Black people need to show up in these spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Professor Unique or Elliott, would y'all like to jump in? Yes.
Fabulous. I'm already here for everything that's happening, that's about to happen. So being woke to me, firstly, I feel like it's without saying that I think that this term has been co-opted. And I think it is now a punchline, and that pisses me off, right? Like many terms that were created by Black people, Black women, intersectionality is another term. They just become internet buzzwords for people's TikTok posts and Instagram posts. And that to me drains the actual meaning and intention behind the word woke, right? If we're talking about it's in beginnings in 1938 and what Black people were dealing with then and the heaviness and the weight of that and alerting Black people to keep their eyes open. There's a power in that, right? There's a warning, there's almost a harbinger, a catalyst of understanding that in order for our survival, we need to remain alive and not tricked by the tricksters, you know what I'm saying, of white supremacy. This notion and ideology of success and what that means, being in proximity to whiteness. So with that, white folks have stolen woke, right? Like, and they got it on Hex. Oh my God, what year is it? They got it on Macy's commercials now, you know what I mean? And whatever, like just wherever they want to throw it. And to me, that's taking the power out of the word again, right? And it's serving the notion of what Charnell mentioned earlier of this sort of anti-woke movement, right? You have to make it a punchline in order to de-invalidate it, you know what I mean? Or invalidate it. So I think with that said, woke to me in its original understanding is an awareness and a consciousness and a knowledge and understanding of yourself, as well as a respect and love for people's basic humanity, which I think we have lost as a society, right? And I think that's why it's so easy to just cancel people left and right and to even people who are doing right, get canceled. And you know what I'm saying? So I think that, we've lost our way with that in terms of remembering a unity consciousness. So with that said, I think it also means a denial of respectability politics. I didn't come from respectability politics. I come from people that are from the projects, right? I come from Lexington Terrace in Baltimore, Maryland. So I don't know what respectability politics are. All I know is my mother told me that I needed to learn how to talk when I get around white people, right? In order to get ahead, right? And education was also seen as a way out. So I feel like through education, I became more, quote, woke, right? I became more solidly understanding of our history and how not to repeat that history and how to progress us forward and how to be someone that is, representing what it means to be Black in spaces that might actually be counterintuitive to our greatness, right? And it's having the daring audacity to be that in these spaces where we weren't even meant to be in the first place, right? So while I'm there, I'm going to talk about us and make it very known that we are here. I'm not going to be a silent Black person, right? I'm not going to be, safe, right? I want y'all to know I'm here, right? I want y'all to know that we here. So, all of that to say, of course, Black people need to stay woke at work. It's a no-brainer, in my opinion. I think we need to teach ourselves knowledge of self and awareness and self-determination and building of ourselves and our hearts and our minds and our bodies and our spirits, moving away from the damages of white supremacy. And I'm done. I'm just going to stop there.
Listen, okay? The daringness. Come on. Yes. Elliott, please share with us.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to give reverence to the both of y'all and the things that y'all said. I'm going to try my hardest not to just repeat. I don't like to just repeat things that people said, but I do want to add my context to it. Just add my paradigm and my lens. To answer the question, the same answer as y'all, do Black professionals need to stay woke? Short answer is yes. Let's go ahead and get that one out the way. But now, how do we define woke and why do Black professionals need to be woke? I think so. I define wokeness, just like I said when we first opened, similar to that answer. To me, it has a lot to do with navigating the gray areas and the nuance and the things that we often don't touch, the things that aren't necessarily pretty, right? So when we talk about, first of all, I only like to use the term woke because Professor Unique, just like you said, it's a term that's been co-opted, overused, and diluted in every sense of the word in terms of popular culture, and it hasn't lost its literal meaning and literal power, but it has lost its contextual meaning and power. I want to say because it's not, you can't overuse something if you use it in a proper context. The problem isn't that it's overly used. The problem is that it's used in an absolute wrong context by the wrong people to glorify themselves rather than glorify what they're woke about. So that's a big issue that I see. For me, I think Black professionals need to be woke, because for me, being woke isn't about just addressing a problem. It's not just about addressing like the surface level Black and white problems. It's also about how you address those problems. Like, for example, you talk about cancel culture and you talk about just disowning or canceling somebody. For me, it raises the question. I have a great friend of mine, brilliant, talented. He could easily be the president of the United States. He's in jail right now for a murder charge. All the people that once celebrated and lifted him are now distancing themselves as far as possible from him. And these are quote unquote woke people. These are people who do quote unquote woke work that are distancing themselves from him. So for me, it raises the question. How do you engage with people who make mistakes? Right? How do you engage with imperfect people? Because we're all imperfect. So how do we engage with anybody in our reality? And how do you embrace that humanity? So for me, being woke is really all about being able to see, being able to take yourself out of a situation and see it from a bird's eye view and be able to address it from an equity lens. And I think we often conflate the terms equality and equity, or we often confuse those terms. Equality is everybody getting the same thing. Equity is you getting what you need. If we try to reach a 10-foot basketball rim, I'm gonna need a little ladder, bro. I'm 5'9", I can't jump that high. You know what I'm saying? I need a little ladder. Somebody else can just probably stand and touch it. Somebody else can just do a little jump and dunk. So for me to touch it, I need a ladder. I need to be on somebody's shoulder, something thrown up there. That's equity, right? Addressing the needs versus addressing everybody getting the same thing, because then you take the individual out. You take the individual out of the equation. And I think, so for me, being woke is being able to address the nuances of all of these different things in a nutshell.
Yes. Wonderful. I mean, listen, the chat is going crazy right now. We're seeing a quote coming in from Julia Covert. Woke equals we often kill each other with words, wickedness, and guns, and it starts with us. I am, you are. And Chrissy Thornton, our president, is saying equality versus equity. Yes. Amen. The goal is liberation, removing the obstacles together. Definitely. Listen, y'all, this conversation just started and already the gems are being dropped. So I hope that y'all got your gem collectors, got your bag, got your purse, picking up these gems and putting them in your heart. The next question I want to ask our panelists is, when we talk about equity versus equality, when we talk about being woke at work for Black professionals, can y'all talk about what are some of the career benefits and disadvantages of being woke in the workplace? Because, and I posed this question to you all because we do see some of the ways that folks might get penalized, right, for their politics, or coming into a space that is conservative with radical politics, right? Working at a space that tells you to present in a certain way or to think in a certain way with a different agenda, and wanting to be concerned, as Chrissy mentioned in the chat, about liberation for Black folks and Indigenous people of color, BIPOC folks. What are some of the career benefits and disadvantages of being woke in the workplace, in particular for Black professionals? And we can go ahead and start with Professor Unique, if that's okay with this one.
For sure. So I believe there are advantages to being woke. For me, using my life as an example, it prevented me from going in a lot of directions I didn't need to go, right? I was never the person that felt like I needed to get a job for money. It was always passion. It was always heart. It was always, I'm going to be led where I know I will be of best service to the community, right? And as an artist, right, like it's, I didn't know I was going to be on a teacher path, and it just led me on a teacher path, especially in higher ed. But I also do work with K through 12 students doing poetry workshops as well in Baltimore City. So it's allowed me, when I have knowledge of self and what I want to do and what my purpose is, right, I am able to live in that purpose and actualize that and believe that, and then pass that on. What I received as a young student who was a young poet in the city, that mentorship and that guidance, I now give that back to people. So I'm clear on my purpose. So I follow that. And, you know, the universe opens up doors that allows me to continue to be not only financially savvy and stable, but also walk in that purpose, right? And in that truth. I never felt like I needed to go the corporate route. I'm gonna just keep it 105, right? Like, because it wasn't about that for me. I never felt like, you know, I needed to wear my hair in a certain way to, you know, tame my personality or talk in a certain way. Yes, I will give you this because I work at, you know, an academic institution, right? But I can just as easily, you know, it's all of me. I'm still being myself in that. So I think that it's allowed me to know my worth and know where I belong and know that I belong there, right? And also to be around colleagues and networks that also get that, right? I exist in a space of people who also, you know, I'm not going to say think entirely similar to me because that's not what it's about, but at least we're on the same page about basic humanity, like I was saying earlier, you know, and understanding of racism, white supremacy, you know, all of the things that you just know not to do when you sort of have a, you know, a love for humanity, right? And for the planet that we live on. So with that, it also, again, people that have that base level 101, at least understanding. So I'm not fighting with people every day. I just don't have the energy. Disadvantages though, I think, there's a sort of limited, you know, space that you can show up in, right, in many ways. And I feel like you might get called out, right? You might get singled out. If you, countless examples in nonprofits, I'm gonna just go there. If you're in a nonprofit that says that it's doing, you know, its mission statement sounds really great and friendly and, you know, there's all the equity terms and the DEI this and all of that, right? But on the ground, are they doing that actual work? How are they treating their staff? How are they treating, you know, the youth or the population that they work with? That shows a lot more. You know, and say that, for example, this organization is predominantly white and you are a Black employee and you decide to call them out, you know, when you start feeling a way about something like something don't feel right here. And, you know, instead of gaslighting, you want to maybe send an email to people, right? Then you get ostracized, you get targeted. There's a bigger target on your back when you're woke at work, right? You know, you might think that you got people on your side and then you find out you singled out. You know what I'm saying? If you want to be the one to blow the whistle, right? Like, you know, who's really going to be down for you with that? So it puts more of a target on your back. You are more singled out and you really see that not everybody's your friend. You know, like, and when you know, Baltimore's very small. So, you know, you got friends over here that no friends over here. So it's about that thing of like running your mouth and then you might, you know, unfortunately shoot yourself in the foot, metaphorically speaking, right? And then it messes dollars. And then it's just, it gets messy. Community is messy sometimes. So I think that can be the disadvantage of it as well.
Yeah, very real. And we're hearing folks coming in on the chat. I just wanted to encourage you, if you're just joining us, please feel free to interact with this conversation. We would love to hear from you. I'm seeing some things coming in the chat. Here we're talking about, yep, you turn around and there's no one behind you. That could be an effect. And Bernard from ABC says, know your purpose, worth, and walk in truth. And then it looks like we have some questions coming in. We'll get to those a little bit later, but something about Nira, we'll get to your questions in a bit. Elliott, do you want to give us some thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep this one brief.
Yes.
Just as I know time and, you know, I tend to be long-winded, so I'm gonna try to keep it brief. But I think I think a lot of the benefits are intrinsic and a lot of the drawbacks, a lot of the hindrances tend to be more extrinsic in nature, and I put hindrances in quotations, and I'll get to why. But when I think about the benefits for me personally, I've never been anything but the fullest version of myself, authentically, as loudly as possible. And I'm not a loud person, but I am loudly me. Right. So any space that I've been in, you know what I stand for, you know what I do and don't like. And if I don't find myself A, happy, B, fulfilled, or C, in terms of my values, morals, and ethics aligning with a space, I leave. I'll figure out the rest after I leave. For me, it's really been that simple. And there have been times I struggled because of that, which gets to the hindrances. Sometimes it can lead to a lack of stability when you refuse to align with something that doesn't align with, when you refuse to align with something that doesn't align with your values, morals, and ethics. That can lead to a lack of stability at times. In my personal experience, it can lead to threats. It can lead to what's the term? What I'm trying to think of how to best phrase this, or most accurately phrase it. Not best. There's no best way. It can lead to being ostracized by. It can lead to being ostracized by people. But for me personally, I think the intrinsic benefits, knowing that I chose what was not only best for me, but most authentic and genuine to me, knowing that I chose something that I can stand on, knowing that I chose something that I believe will benefit not only me but the people around me, um, it's a intrinsic benefit as well. Just knowing the peace that you get, knowing that you chose you in a world that wants you to choose everything else, right? Um, and not just choosing your material needs, but choosing your spirit, choosing your soul, choosing your morals, choosing everything that encompasses and everything that makes up you. I think that's the biggest benefit. And honestly, I'll just talk a little bit about my journey. So when I got I got to college as an accounting major on a business track, thinking I'm gonna be a forensic accountant for a Fortune 500 company. You know what I'm saying? I think I'm about to be a certain caliber of employee, right? I get to my classes, I'm like, I'm good at it, but I'm not really passionate about it. Get to my Pan African Studies classes. That was my minor in college. I love it. I get to working in the program that I once was a part of. I loved it. And it was at that moment I started to see certain barriers and gaps. And I said, this is what I want to dedicate my life to. So I graduated. So at a certain point, I got to graduate. So I can't just completely change track for the sake of money. But I changed to an econ degree because it's interdisciplinary. It allows me a lot of mobility and horizontal integration. Ended up my work has been largely in nonprofits and community organizations, right, that are rooted in helping young people in our community, outwardly facing, truly touching and talking to young people in my community, just using my gifts and passions to minister to people, right? And when I say minister, it's nothing to do with religion. It just has everything to do with me being a light to somebody, right? And also allowing them to be a light to me. But me being that person has led me to the two jobs that I've had post college. One, working for an organization called Evolve 502, where I was a student success coordinator, directly interfacing with high school students, helping them transition to college, to where I am now at Fund for the Arts, where I'm the manager of community investment and development, where in an organization of specialists, I'm a generalist in that I'm very engaged and involved in my community. I'm able to talk to donors and generate funding. I'm able to go out into community organizations and figure out the needs for funding and figure out how to connect certain gaps and that aren't being bridged right now. Building bridges between organizations and areas of my city. Because I'm from the West End, I'm from the hood. So a lot of my network is from the hood. So for me, bridging the gap between those organizations and now, the reason I got my job is the CEO of my organization is his name is Andrea Stone Guest. He was asking some of his peers and colleagues, finding a young Black man that he can mentor. Everybody automatically mentioned me, not because of what I do, but because of who I am. And when I think about being woke at work, that's who I am, not what I do. Right. So when I think of the benefits, that's part of that intrinsic part is the job that I have now. Intrinsically, I'm pleased because I'm in a space where I'm constantly around art, which is something I love as an artist myself. I'm able to create funding opportunities for people that wouldn't have it otherwise or wouldn't know about it otherwise. I'm able to plug them in to get those opportunities. Really just being able to stand in that gap and that bridge, it's a huge benefit to me. So the benefit to me is intrinsic rather than extrinsic.
Listen, mic drop on that. And we put that quote in the chat. Woke is who I am, it's not what I do. I think that is something that is a principle that we can all hold to and integrate into our daily practice and challenge ourselves to question, is woke something you do or is it who you are? Thank you for lifting that up. Andrea, did you have anything to add?
I would just add, my piece that I had to come to terms with over, I guess, through college and through my work career, because I've straddled the fence and been in both sides. I've been in corporate America, I've been in community grassroots organizations, and then just independently working for myself in this space. One of the things that really I guess, no puns intended, but woke me to my corporate experience and how that showed up. Um, one of the experiences I had was people, you know, as Professor said, Baltimore is small. Okay, so working in this job in corporate America, and one of the managing directors got wind of who was my uncle. And that took on a different meaning, that took on a different feel for me, because I realized that in this white space, my talent and my ability only became an asset because of my community connection. And I rode that train for a while, but then I realized in a meeting that the reality is most of the systems and institutions in our country were not built for us. And everything that was structured within those institutions and systems was strategically and purposefully and intentionally set up to keep us out of it. So that's one thing I had to learn. It's like, how do you be Black? How can you be a Black person in a space that literally was not created for you, right? But at the same time, that same system is telling you that in order to survive in this world, you have to make money. And the only way you're going to make money is to be involved in the system. So it's like, how do you create that balance? How do you get off of that, that continuous realm of you want me, you don't want me, I have to be here, but can I be me? But at the same time, can I be me and still be acceptable and make the money? So it keeps just this constant rotation of identity and purpose and alignment and all the things that Elliott and Professor have said. How do we manage that? So all that to say, it is an advantage at times because it gives me money. It pays me. I get to feed my family. I get to feed a roof over my head. Disadvantages, depending on circumstances, where you work and who you work with, and what you're doing, it can be draining. And not just. And sometimes that drain is not about. It has nothing to do with the work you do. It is simply getting up day in and day out and going to this space where you may be the only Black person in the space, right? That is draining and taxing. I think we all have to many of us have to realize that right off the bat. Sometimes, it's not even 9 o'clock. It's 8:55, and you already tapped out just getting coffee, right? You just like, I'm done. And sometimes we don't even realize that as professionals. Like, why am I so tired? Right? I ain't do nothing last night. I just sit here at this desk and this computer. Why am I tired? Or, and what I found during this whole, pandemic, Blackness at one point was real celebrated. We was high, especially those of us who doing diversity and equity and inclusion work, right? I don't like to use DEI. This is what I do, right? I represent my Blackness. But now I'm reaching out to people. They losing their job left and right? Because them vision statements and them, we stand in solidarity. That was all good 2 years ago, right? But when an impending recession is happening, the first people to go is the DEI or equity folks, right? They first to go. Like, y'all expendable. So doing the type of work, there's some advantages and disadvantages, but I don't, even though there are disadvantages to being woke at work, as Elliot said, if you are in an environment and you are purposefully doing stuff with a passion, no matter what it is, you could be the janitor, you could be the CEO, right? The advantage comes by you being comfortable. I think the disadvantage comes when you're quote unquote not woke and don't realize all of the pitfalls that the system has.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Thank y'all. And so, I kind of want to get a little bit into, y'all shared some of the personal pieces, but I want to get into some of your personal experiences or direct lived experiences with being a Black professional who was woke in the workplace. In other words, give us some specific personal examples of your workplace experiences while being woke. And I'm actually going to start this one. And first, I just want to say that I am honored. I feel privileged, humbled, blessed to be at an organization. One of my mentors uses the term organism to describe true organizations that live and thrive within community. So even thinking, I'm always thinking about language, but for the purposes of the understanding that we still use organization, I feel like Associated Black Charities does function as that organism, right? And so I feel super fortunate under the wonderful leadership of our president and CEO, Chrissy Thornton, and the rest of our team, the work that we're doing, I feel passionate about, I feel engaged. I have known Professor Unique for most of my life, and we have both collectively always chosen work that reflects our views, our perspectives, our politics, and our passion that has not always been about pay and usually isn't about pay. But it is such an honor to be able to say that the example that I'm going to share is not from my current job. I actually feel very supported and connected and proud of the mission and the work that the organization or organism that I'm attached to and that I'm centered in is doing the work that it says that it's doing. So I just wanted to start with that. The example that I will share from a personal experience, I won't say the organization, but when I was an undergraduate, I worked as an urban education fellow in New York City. And so this was a program where college students were able to teach high school and training to be educators. And so I got my post to teach at this particular high school in Manhattan. And, me coming in, the first thing I want to know is, particularly having a youth organizing background in Baltimore City and doing the work as a youth organizer and as an artist at a very young age, my first thought was, what are the students doing? What do they need? Where are they at? What are they concerned about? What's important to them? And as soon as I got there, I noticed that there was all this tension and conflict with students in the school. Lots of fights were happening, particularly with the ninth grade young women students in particular. So I started having some casual conversations with the young women. And what came up was all of these barriers that had nothing to do with school, but everything to do with school. The sort of systemic that goes to personal, if that makes sense, right? So young women telling me about issues with hunger or issues with sexual assault in their homes, issues with safety, issues with houselessness, all these very pertinent issues that if they are not addressed, that you cannot be successful in school. So my job is to come in and teach AP African American Studies and AP Lit. But meanwhile, I have students who are having these very real issues that are preventing them from being successful, and it comes out in their behavior. So I went to my principal and I said, listen, we need to do something. Whatever we're doing is not working. These young people are challenged. They're having some real issues. Did you know this student is going through this and this student is going through that? And the principal sat there and looked at me with this look. And y'all know what that look is. That's why are you telling me what I'm supposed to do? Look. And so I was very much like, as a young educator, clenching my pearls. How dare you not address the very population that you're serving? Young people are suffering and not able to do what they come here to do. So I said, listen, I'll tell you what, you don't have to give me any money. I'll raise some money myself. I want to start a mentoring program with the young women, the ninth grade girls. And they all happened to be at this school. We had one white young woman. They all happened to be young women of color, mostly Black, Latinx, and a few Indigenous young women. So we started the Phenomenal Women Empowerment Group, working with the counselor at the school. And in doing so, we were able to address a myriad of issues, met exclusively with this group for about 2 hours every Friday, matched them with other young Black women and non-binary folks at the local colleges that I was affiliated with at the New School, Columbia, NYU. If they had an interest in English, we matched them with someone with English, took them on college campuses, let them see other women of color in positions of power, doing great work in the community, doing work at universities, professors, etc., just so they could see themselves in a success story rather than just seeing themselves in trauma. And so instantly what we noticed was this deep connection to the young women's behavior shifting when they were able to be seen and to be heard. And the curriculum that I used with them was definitely centered on Black women's stories, queer people's experiences and histories. People say the alternative history, I say the true history of the United States, which includes chattel slavery and the nuances of Reconstruction, etc. And I shared that to say that despite me having this lack of support at all from the administration to do this work. Of course, y'all know when we started having success rates, when we had 96% of the girls who started with us, the young women who started with us, ended up going to college. About 90% of them finished college. Another 4% of them went on to have jobs afterwards. And the program was so successful that even after I left, it continued. I believe it still continues to this day at the school. You know, when the successes started coming up, they were like, oh, we want to talk about the Phenomenal Women program that one of our student teachers started. Okay, but there was no institutional support initially. So the reason why I shared that story as one of my experiences with being woke at work is that sometimes you have to push what is right and what is needed despite having the support from those that are above you. And ultimately, it makes the organization, the institution, the school, the nonprofit actually look good when your program and idea is successful, and they will take the credit. But I think it's important for us to make sure that we persevere despite whatever support or lack of support we might have from those in positions of power at these institutions. So I just wanted to name that as my experience. One of my experiences will be in woke at work. Professor Unique, can you tell us some of your personal experiences, direct lived experiences with being work at work, or at least one?
Absolutely. I got too many. So fortunately, MICA, Maryland Institute College of Art, for those who don't know, is an institution in Baltimore that is right in the middle of the city. MICA has been trying to rectify its racist past because, as we know, each and every last one of these colleges and institutions have a racist past, and there's no way around it that are PWIs. So MICA is trying to be better about integrating itself in the city rather than just having, you know, an exploitative sort of understanding and awareness of the city. So with that said, MICA had a mandate, diversity, equity, inclusion, and they added the G, globalization. I have issues with that mandate after the Baltimore uprising in April of 2015. That was prior to me being there. And then when I came on in late 2016 in the fall, I was kind of right in the middle of that. And they've had a mandate to, you know, to decentralize whiteness in the curriculum, to hire more faculty of color, to hire more students of color. And I will say that they have held their they've held their word on that. Right? Like I've seen a huge population increase of us in the space, right? However, the department that I was in when I was adjunct for those past 6 years, now full-time, you know, long overdue, that, you know, the department was humanistic studies, and that department is overran by a bunch of older white people. Just gonna say it plainly. If anybody's seen that show, The Chair, it was like that on Netflix. So my thing is, just as a young Black, queer, non-binary person, I'm born in the 80s. I'm already like over half of the stuff that people are talking about anyway. You know, so I wanted to decentralize whiteness in general in my curriculum, right? So I had a class, a creative writing class, as well as a critical theory course for freshmen, the creative writing class for students, all, you know, freshmen, well, sophomore, junior, senior, et cetera. But I'm all, the BIPOC, BIPOC canon, queer trans authors, we doing all of that, queer trans poets, because the student population was becoming more queer, more trans, and more students of color, all across the board. So I'm speaking to their existence. They can see, themselves in the work. Right. And I think when you are operating in an institution that for the past 200 years has just taught white people to white people, that's a problem. Right. And y'all still are doing that in 2023. So the students started making noise about that. And, I'm like, I got y'all. So because of that, my class became one of the most popular. Right. Like, the students are just telling each other about it. I never had an issue with getting students in this class. It was waitlisted all the time. So, I changed the class name to Decolonize Your Mind. That's what it's about, right? The critical theory, that's cute, right? That's what they're trying to cancel. But it's really about understanding decolonization. And what does that mean for everyone, right? Black folks, white folks, Latinx folks, Asian folks, all around the world, because MICA is a very international population. We all have dealt with that. Racism is the child of decolonization, right? So we all have experienced that, and our tongues have been decolonized, our food has been colonized, our skin, all of those things. So I break all of this stuff down, right? So students for years to come have been like, you really helped me to, formulate my identity at a very crucial time in my life. And now I feel like I can be more of myself and have the conversations I want to have that I was scared to have because it always ended in debates and fights and all of that, right? So I gave them some tools to be able to be comfortable being themselves, community agreements, teaching with multiple intelligences to multiple abilities. I'm really aware and conscious of that just as a learner, a lifelong learner, and really listening to my students, doing student evaluations, really incorporating their feedback, right? So that's a lot of how I do it, just every day, all day.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Professor Unique. Andrea, would you like to share maybe one of your personal experiences, direct lived experiences with being woke at work?
I'll give the experience of working that you and I share. Is in a capacity as the members and leaders of a community advisory board with the agency in Baltimore City.
Okay.
So, I would say it was more what I'll share is more of a collective experience, not so personal. This convening of community members was solely to look and address problems that the agency felt that they were having in connecting with community, right? In the sphere of maternal and infant health. So the very purpose of it was to convene community members who look like the client population they serve, i.e. Black people, right? To get an understanding of what it is that they were doing wrong, or what is that they needed to do to get to the next level of the work that they were doing to address maternal and infant health disparities. So I'll keep saying it because the basic premise was the acknowledgement that this agency was not doing enough, right? And that they acknowledge that the only way that they are going to tap into the knowledge base and the understanding is to convene community members. Well, we get knee deep into the work. We calling out stuff, telling them, we lay down ground rules. This is what we are not going to do in this space, right? Because this is a safe space. So there were two instances that really were shocking to me. The one thing that we had as a collective agreement, as community members and members of this board, was that we were not going to entertain the idea of anything that had to do with Johns Hopkins Hospital or Johns Hopkins University, simply because of the historic impact that they've had on Black people. Well, lo and behold, Charnell and I and the rest of our team members, community members walk into a meeting and, they, numb us with food, divert us with laughter and chatter. And then we hear, and tonight we're going to have Professor so-and-so from Johns Hopkins present on a study that he wants to do for lead poisoning. You know, like, it's just like one of those things out of, you know, like Spike Lee movie. Everybody hands fly up, like, what?
Oh, yes, they did. Oh, yes, they did. I remember that day
we
well.
looking at each other like, wait a minute, did I just walk into the Twilight Zone? Because I know they didn't just say Hopkins, and I know they just didn't say lead poisoning, right? So that was an instance, right, where my blackness, you need my blackness, you ask my blackness to sit at your table, right? I say, okay, I'll sit at your table, but this is what we can't do, right?
Mhm.
And then you just blatantly violate that agreement, right? And you do so with the, oh no, that's not what we meant, right? So that was a hard push for me because it's like you could not get the leadership of that agency to understand what it is that they just did, right? And that the understanding of the fact that what you just did to us is what you continuously do to our families out in the community, right? All in the guise of understanding and wanting to support. Um, so that was that. And the other experience of my blackness and being woke in a professional space had to do really with how, you know, I have real issues with the nonprofit system back in Maryland. Because one of the conversations that even that Charnell actually led was the idea that a lot of the organizations that are offering community support and services in Baltimore City for Black and Brown folk, all of their leadership and middle management is white. And when we said that out our mouths, it was as if, oh no, you know, one of them other, not us. And just understanding that even in my quote unquote wokeness and my quote unquote authenticity as a Black person, oftentimes really didn't mean much in those spaces because the people who are controlling the dollars are all white, right? So that was problematic, and you know, and how did you know? My answer to that was, you know what, let's just agree. And Charnell is my witness. I said, you don't need me, and I don't need you. That's just be real, right? Because you are only valid in my community if I validate you, right?
Mm.
But what you're asking me to do is for me to validate you, and I don't validate you. And the best way that I can make you invalid in my work is choose to not work with you. And so sometimes, you know, your blackness, sometimes we want to take up space, but sometimes the absence of our presence speaks more volume than anything.
Mm. You need me to validate you, and I will not validate you. Quotable. Thank you, Andrea. Listen, this has been such a rich conversation, and I want to make sure we leave space for questions. Elliott, I'm going to get to you in 1 second to share that personal experience, but I'm going to ask you to start us off with this question. You can loop in a personal experience, but as a concluding question, I would like to ask you all, what are some tips and strategies in maintaining your most woke and authentic self at work? So Elliott, you can start us off with this one if you want to weave in one of your experiences with your tips and strategies for being your most woke and authentic self at work.
So I'm gonna give the tip that I do. I'm pretty sure Professor Unique and Miss Muhammad probably have much deeper advice than I do. You know, just a wider plethora of life experience, right? But my tip, you know, just in my 24 years of life, the strategy of maintaining your most woke and authentic self at work, I journal every day, right? And I journal every day. I typically I find a prompt or something just to streamline how I feel about this prompt, or if there's something going on, it's a format I use called what, why, and how. What do I feel? Why do I feel it? How can I address it? And sometimes addressing it isn't always external, but it's internal. And sometimes you don't need to address every issue externally. Sometimes, just unpacking it within yourself and understanding how, one, is not personal, and then two, understanding how you can better navigate it in the future. Um, Sometimes that's the best solution. That's the best resolution. But for me personally, not objectively, but subjectively for me. But I guess a personal experience, it was a job. I've been blessed in the sense that I've worked in, just because of, again, I don't even want to say being woke, being aware, right? Just being aware of what's going on, and then being intentional about how I want to engage with it. It's enabled me to work in some of the most progressive, non-problematic spaces that I've been in. So like, just some of the best spaces that I've been in, where people are just, similarly aligned. The problems that I have aren't necessarily always with how I'm treated. It's typically with how the people around me are treated, with their experience, and particularly our young people. So I got a young man that I work with, and I did something for him that is outside of the scope of my work, but I care about him. Elliott Kelly cares. My title doesn't care. I care. So I went the extra 15 miles for him, right? So and he was just like, "You probably gonna post about this on your IG, ain't you? You probably gonna brag about this." I'm like, no, I do this because I love you, bro. You know what I'm saying? If this is ever referenced, it'll be because of a bigger story. I will not be glorified as a result of this. And like, it really made me unpack. It's like, damn, he really feels like I'm helping him so I can be glorified. That's deep, because that had nothing to do with me. I know he trusts me, but he's taught that people that help you want something from you. And I think back to prior work experiences that even I've worked with him, where coworkers will do great things for these young people, or facilitate these programs, but they're not glorifying they're not glorifying the individuals in the program. They glorifying the program, and they glorifying themselves. And me personally, hate is a strong word, so I'm gonna use it. I hate it. Just quite transparently. Um, and me addressing that. So even going back to what, why, and how, what are you doing? Why? Those three questions can take you so far in any avenue for me. So what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And how can you improve? Like, what, why? Those questions can be changed and mixed up to address any issue. So when it comes to maintaining my awareness and maintaining, like, being able to step into a space as the fullest that I can be in a given moment, not necessarily always at 100. Sometimes our battery's not always charged up, right? Sometimes we're not at 100. Sometimes we at 90. So me being at my best is not me trying to get back to 100 and be at 100 at all times. It's me operating the best I can at that 90, that 85, that 75, that 65, being the best that I can right there, and acknowledging that that's where I am, and making the people around me aware, here's where I am. So, I love if you could engage with me accordingly, and I greatly appreciate it. So just journaling and being self-aware, I think that's the biggest thing personally. So I journal every day, what, why, and how. And then, but yeah, I would say that's my experience that I deal with. And even when it comes to, I know I shared with y'all panelists, so I just had, in the past month and a half, I've had two young people that I know die and one get locked up. So for me, the work that I ain't gonna say the work I do, the work with these young people is crucial, and it means the world to me, because it's life or death for some of them, right? It is literally life or death. There's no room for personal glorification. There's no room for selfishness in this work. There's only room for community. It's a very Eurocentric value to live in a mode of individuality or self-glorification. That's a very Eurocentric value. In a norm, just because it's a norm doesn't make it normal.
Mm-hmm.
Or just because it's normal doesn't make it right. So
Yes.
for me, it's so I would say it's acknowledging all of those things, and it brings me to, and those are the things that bring me to tears. It's not even just the young people that I lose, and for me, it's just what do you do when the work isn't going your way? Do you quit? And a lot of times, those are the people that quit. And I
Mhm.
always talk about this. What do you do when a young person that you work with, when that person dies? What do you do when somebody makes a mistake that gets them condemned? How do you engage with that young person? Right? Going back to that gray area, navigating that nuance, navigating the in-between space, the black, the white, and the infinite shades of gray in between. How do you navigate those shades? So I think that's what I'm constantly addressing people on and checking people on. And it's never like how people treat me. I get treated well. Right. I don't give people a reason. I don't give people a reason to treat me poorly. And if you do treat me poorly, I'm not gonna be around you. It's that simple. Uh, I'm blessed to be in a space. I'm blessed to be in spaces where I can make that choice. It's a privilege that I have personally, that I know everybody doesn't have. But I can choose not to be around people um if they're a little too problematic for my liking. But when it comes to these young people, that's where a lot of my advocacy comes in. That's where a lot of my wokeness comes in. That's where my awareness and my ability to take a step back and see it from a bird's eye view. That's where a lot of it comes in, is when it comes to how we, not only just the what we do, but the culture that we create around it.
Yes.
That's where a lot of my advocacy comes in, and it breaks my heart 99% of the time, because I'm like, man, yeah, I see these young people as a statistic, but I see a young life. Not even just me.
That
This
part.
is a young life. So that's what I see a lot in my work. So sometimes being woke isn't about how I get treated. Professor Unique and Charnell, I know both of y'all talked about y'all's experiences, what y'all did for others. And for me, that's the highest form of wokeness that you can achieve, right? Not about glorifying yourself or creating space for yourself. You create space for yourself so you can help other people create that space for themselves. So me, the space that I don't even, it's not even creating space. Every space I walk into is mine, right? How can I create something that I already own and occupy? So for me, it's like that's not all about creating and taking space, because shit is mine. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to take what I you can't steal what belongs to you. You can't take and forcefully grab what belongs to you. It is what it is. You know, it's yours. Own it. And teaching other young people how to embody that, for better and for worse. For me, that's where the wokeness comes in my personal experiences, navigating people who engage with young people selfishly and engage with community selfishly. I hate it. Even in 2020 in the movement space, right? Something that I would say all the time, you here for a movement or you here for the moment? Because if you're here for a genuine movement, the motion was before 2020, and the motion is still going on
Absolutely.
right now, and the motion will perpetually continue. So
Absolutely. Elliott, thank you.
so yeah,
Thank you.
that's it for me.
You dropped some pertinent gems, and we appreciate it. I just want to ask, Andrea, can you give us some quick tips? Maybe keep the comments a little brief so we can get to our questions. This conversation is so rich, and we have so much to say. Go ahead, Andrea. What are some of your tips and strategies?
Um, the only tip that I really have to add to that is just, as Ellie said, to just be your authentic self. Know why you're there, know who you are, know what you stand for, know why you're doing. Um, no problem. Know why you're doing certain things. Um, Even in that job, it doesn't matter if you work for corporate America. It doesn't matter if you work for a university, hospital, any institution. Know what your purpose is, and own it. If your purpose is there just to get money, all right, all more power to you. All the power in the world, because you know your purpose, right? So you probably the one that don't even um be impacted or take things emotionally or have that mental burden or the psychological burden on you. And guess what? I still love you, right? Because you in your purpose. That's your purpose. Um, and that's really it. Just know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and who you're doing it for. Um, and once you have the understanding, you move in your purpose, because that's literally what that means. You know.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, indeed.
mhm.
Thank you, Andrea. Professor Unique, you want to close us out with some tips and strategies?
For sure. I'm gonna read them off. Don't dim your light so others can shine.
Come
Know your
on.
worth and don't depend on external validation from anybody. Practice transformative justice, do the least harm in community and address the harm when it is caused. Make sure it's rooted in principles of love. Meet yourself where you're at, regardless of the demands on you. Know your limits and your boundaries and be unapologetic about them. This stuff I'm still learning. Learn to balance and don't just people please for the sake of people pleasing. Know when and how to say no and not give up free labor no more. Learn and uncover the truths and histories we were barred from learning on purpose because ignorance is at an all-time high and is being used as a weapon against us, as we see. Educating oneself on the truth is liberating oneself. I meditate in my office. Boom, do that. Change work culture from this white supremacist, whatever, devoid of spirit. I play music while I work because that's how I work. I do work in the way that brings me joy. And if you hire me, know that I'm going to do me or won't be done at all, period. Drops mic.
Absolutely. And listen, I there were too many to list. I hope y'all were taking that list down. Professor Unique, we might have to get you to send me that list so I can email it out to folks because that was on point. I want to share one with you. Live the intersection, be the intersection. And what do I mean by that? For me, I show up as my very Black self, my very queer self, my very spiritual Christian, Afrocentric, fab, femme self in every space that I'm in, including my work. Live the intersection, be the intersection. It's not just a term about theory, it's a term about practice. And so when we show up in those ways, we can definitely do a lot of uplifting that is selfless, like Elliott taught us about. So listen, we have some questions coming in. And if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A or the chat. I'm actually going to start with Nira's question that was raised earlier. Give me 1 second just to pull that up. Nira posted a question earlier. Okay, I am missing it. Nira, if you don't mind, I'm not seeing it in the chat right now. If you don't mind dropping that question in the chat once again so we can get to it. I do apologize. I'm not seeing it in the chat at the moment. So I'm going to go to our Q&A deck. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A deck. And I want to pull up who we have here. So is there a difference in just doing your job and being woke was one of the questions that was offered. Is there a difference in just doing your job and being woke? So Professor Unique, you want to comment on that?
I want to acknowledge Andrea's hand.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I have the chat. I apologize.
Thank you. I was just going to answer that question with what I said when working your purpose and know why you're there and you're doing the job. The flip side of that is when you don't and you just show up and not, trying to tap into your wokeness, then that becomes a problem. Because then you be a co-conspirator.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of folks are working. So, for me, there's a difference between your purpose and you just showing up, right? Because if you just showing up just to do your job and you let stuff go by because you're doing your job, right? Then, you then become a co-conspirator, okay? Mm-hmm. When you work in your purpose and you know why you're there, right? Things may not affect you emotionally and mentally, but when you see stuff happening, you will internally just naturally speak up, mm-hmm. Right? And that's how I see it. So no, sometimes you just cannot show up to work. Okay, you just can't. And we all see and know those people who just show up to work and meetings and be like, why aren't you here? Like, mm-hmm. Really? Why? There's somebody here who could add more value to you, So yeah, there's a difference.
Elliott, you want to give any closing remarks on that question?
Just want to lift up something that was said earlier. just remember, it's not about what you do, it's about who you are. You do your job. You are, I hate the term woke. You do your job. You are woke, right? You do your job, but you are an advocate. You do your job, but you are a social disruptor. You do your job, but you are the person who navigates that nuance. So so do your job, but be intentional about be intentional about being more.
I appreciate that. I'm sorry.
That's the last thing I want to lift up.
Yeah. Professor Unique, I'm sorry, we didn't hear from you on this question. Did you have anything to add?
It's definitely a difference. But like Elliott said, woke is who you are. It's consciousness, right? So regardless of what your job is, you can either infuse your consciousness into that job. And if you try not to, it'll be very hard to exist in that space. I've tried. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't, just separate and fragment yourself or decompartmentalize. It doesn't last very long. Because the emotional energy, repression will build up and you'll burn out. Right. So unless you get a real easy type job where it's mindless and you just folding papers or something, right? But even with that, you got coworkers most likely there with you. So you're gonna have to have a moment of it's all of this stuff is connected. At every part of society, whatever job we're doing, we're still operating under the system of capitalism. So you gotta be woke in the system that you're in, regardless of where you work, period, point blank. So
that part. I just want to take this time to say thank you to our wonderful panelists. Thank you for your expertise and your deep thoughts, prolific thoughts, transformative thoughts. I feel like there was a lot that was offered. I'd like to leave you all with a poem from some young students from Milwaukee. Ashley, Nzuri, and Katika wrote this poem about being woke. To be woke is not just a political ideology, it is an irretractable existence, a contradictory remedy of healing and pain, the cultivation of a deep and necessary consciousness of survival that slices white patriarchal supremacy and wounds the heart, opening minds. Our eyes never shut. Our voices never cease. We are courageous. We are fierce. We are exhausted, and yet we persist. We are alive. We are here. We are woke. I leave y'all with that poem, and I would ask you as a prompt to think about what poem would you write to encapsulate this experience about all the things you heard about wokeness, and how can you apply that in your work. I'd like to invite you to join us at the last Tuesday of March, Women's History Month, and we will be having another Equity at Work webinar series, which happens monthly every Tuesday, the last Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. We're going to be talking about the truth about salary negotiation. So this is a webinar that you definitely don't want to miss. You can go to our website, abc-maryland.org/webinars to get more details. Sign up, register, tell a friend. I know that you all were transformed by this experience because I certainly was. Again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Please do follow us on social media, log into our work, and follow these great folks who are here. If y'all want to drop your Instagram or websites in the chat so that people can stay in touch with you, please do that, because that is how we build community, is that we stay in touch with each other. On behalf of all of the Associated Black Charities staff, I again want to say thank you. And I will say, stay woke. Have a good night, everybody.